The content of today's stories may be considered sensitive by some viewers, and as always, viewer discretion is advised. And if you have a story you would like to send my way, just go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. And of course, thank you. I have a creepy story that happened a few years back when my wife and I lived in an apartment at a fairly small apartment complex. It's one of those could have been worse stories, and I'm glad that it happened to me instead of someone else, which may sound weird, but it'll make sense by the end. A few years ago, I went through a pretty rough time in my life. My wife and I were living in the aforementioned apartment complex, and things were going great until I was laid off from my job. I worked for a company that had some branch offices, and I worked at one of those branches. The company decided that they wanted to downsize and move out of my state. So, they shuttered the branch office and basically told us that we no longer had a job. They did offer us a month's worth of pay, but to be told, by the end of Wednesday you won't have a job, on a Monday morning, it kind of sucks. I was obviously a bit down in the dumps after this happened, and it seemed to get worse about 3 days later when my wife's car decided that it wanted to stop running. It had something wrong with it, and it wouldn't start. It's a bit unrelated, but it was the alternator, so it wasn't a terrible fix. But we didn't really have the spare money at the moment, considering I didn't have income. Thankfully, I did have a car, so she was able to take it to work. But this basically meant that until we got the car fixed, I was stuck at home, unless I wanted to walk wherever I wanted to go. I didn't mind walking, but when your attitude is a bit soured by being laid off, well, let's just say the first week or so I stayed in bed. I will also add that between the two cars, it was pretty clear who drove which one. I owned a decent pickup, and she owned a tiny bright blue Yaris with Tinkerbell stickers. Not trying to drop any sort of gendered stereotype, but if you knew it was a couple living there, you could guess which car belonged to which person. Context out of the way, moving on to the story. What happened actually happened in the middle of the second week of me being home. I had decided that I would get up and make it a point of trying to clean up the apartment. Basically, I just wanted to get out of bed and have something to occupy my time. And if I could surprise my wife and make her happy, well, that would be even better. The first thing I needed to clean was myself. Obviously. So I got out of bed and went ahead with taking a shower. By the time I was awake and in the shower, it was around 9:30 in the morning. So it wasn't really early, but it also wasn't late yet in the day. I was in there with the water running, just soaping myself up, when I heard a very distinct sound. The sound of our front door opening. Our door had a bit of a stick on the bottom, so it would drag on part of the floor and make a sliding or scraping noise as you opened it. My obvious initial thought was that my wife had come home early from work for whatever reason, but that didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. She didn't mention that she wasn't feeling well. She didn't tell me that she was taking a half day or anything like that. And we weren't in a position where we could afford to lose even a few hours of income. I kind of stood there for a few minutes waiting for another sound. Like her keys or purse hitting the counter, her feet on the tile, her going to the bedroom, literally anything that would tell me that I wasn't just hearing things. There wasn't anything else for a few moments, so I went back to my shower. I finished up, turned off the water, and I slid the glass door open to grab a towel. The second that I opened the sliding door to the shower, the bathroom door flew open, and the person on the other side was not my wife. It was one of the people that worked for the rental company as a maintenance person. He pushed the door open hard, like he was trying to enter the room aggressively, and he was met with me, standing in the shower, facing him with all the glory bestowed upon me the day that I was born. The look on his face was actually kind of priceless, which I know adds a small amount of humor to this, but I guess I shouldn't detract from how terrifying this really was. I was in the shower, completely vulnerable, and this guy shoved his way into the bathroom the minute the shower turned off. This was meticulous. He was trying to catch someone off guard with his actions, and considering which car was in the driveway, my guess is that he thought my wife was the person that was home. This perspective hit me immediately during the few moments that the two of us were just standing there and staring at each other, and I was pretty livid. I asked him if I could help him, and he started stuttering and trying to figure out what he could say to justify being in my home like this. In the end, he tried to claim that we had been notified yesterday that he would be there, and when I asked him how he notified us, he basically tried to say, your wife should have been told. Never mind. I think I must be mistaken. And then kind of slinked out of the apartment. As soon as he was gone, I called the office and asked them why they had sent maintenance to our place, and they claimed that they hadn't. I informed them about what just played out, and they said they would look into it. Their excuse that they gave about 3 days later was that he had gone to the wrong unit, and they apologized for the inconvenience. Inconvenience be damned, I knew what he was doing. He didn't go to the wrong unit. He thought that my wife was home alone, and that I wasn't there, and he entered our home with malicious intent. Like I mentioned, the fact that he waited for the shower to turn off, and then barged into the bathroom, tells me all I need to know about this situation. I kind of wish that I would have been more aggressive with him, though I know violence isn't the answer, but it terrifies me to think that this wasn't his first time doing something like this. I don't know if he was planning a full-on assault, or if this was maybe some kind of voyeur kink thing, but it was sickening. We don't live at that property anymore, thankfully, and we got everything solved with her car thanks to her brother not long after this. I also bought a couple of Nest cameras with the money that we had saved. I justified it with my wife after I told her what happened and what I thought, and she agreed that it was a good idea. I don't recall ever seeing that maintenance man after this event, and I'm kind of hoping that he got fired. And maybe they just told me a lie about him going to the wrong unit. Back when I was about 13, my family moved into a new house. It was an average-looking house with nothing particularly special about it. It was myself, my parents, and my little brother. At the time, he was about 2 or 3, I believe. There were occasions where I would be left at home if one of them was at work, and the other needed to go do something, and I didn't want to go. So being home alone was normal for me. It was never scary or a big deal, though, as I usually just did the same thing. I would play my N64 in my room or something like that, and probably not even notice how much time had passed until they got back. However, we had a cool-looking crawl space-like area in our new house that I was itching to explore. There was a small door lift in the basement leading to it. My dad said it wasn't anything special, as it would most likely just be dirt and spiders, but if it was a potential hideout spot, I wanted to check it out. While my dad was at work, My mom let me stay home one day as my brother had a doctor's appointment that she had to take him to. After she left, I was watching something on TV when it reminded me of the crawl space. So, I decided that now was the time to take a look. I grabbed a flashlight from the drawer and a small bag to collect anything I found and wanted to keep. I didn't think about the door actually being hard to open, but being a scrawny little boy, it took me some time to finally get it open. I hopped down into it, and there was probably enough room for me to crouch through it. I couldn't quite stand, and I'm sure that my dad would have had to have crawled. I saw a fair share of spiders and other insects, but I didn't scare easily, so I just maneuvered around them or killed them. For the most part, it was uneventful. But as I made my way around the edges, I noticed a pile of stuff in the back corner. When I approached it, I could tell that there was an old blanket covered in dirt and cobwebs, covering something else. I gave it a light kick to make sure nothing moved underneath it, and when nothing came out, I pulled the blanket back, and it seemed to be a bunch of baby stuff. There was an old vintage-style stroller. In it was a box with some kind of toys, and what I think were old photos. You could barely make anything out in the photos, but there was writing on the back of them with a date. I don't remember the date, unfortunately, and the rest of it was in a very fluid cursive, but I couldn't make it out. The toy looked like some kind of baby doll, but it was all soft like a stuffed animal. Then there was the box. Inside, sitting right on top, was a bunch of small teeth. I think they were human because they weren't pointed like canines and felines, and given the fact that they were found where they were. There was something underneath it, and I was going to pull it out when I heard what sounded like footsteps above me. I figured my mom just got home, so I decided to start putting stuff back as it was, covered everything back up, and headed back to the door. To my surprise, as I was walking back, I actually heard my dad call out for me. So I came out of the crawl space, shut the door, and hollered back that I was in the basement and started running upstairs. I expected him to be waiting at the top of the stairs or in the garage, as you have to go through the garage to get to the basement, but he wasn't. I walked into the kitchen from there and the living room again, and he was nowhere to be found. I called out for him, and when I didn't get a response, I just went through each room, even the closets, to find him. I never did. I checked the time and realized my dad should not have even been home, as it was only around noon and he usually got home around 6. This actually spooked me quite a bit. The sound of footsteps, I could see me mistaking for possibly the floor creaking or the house shifting, even though it was a pretty clear pattern of a step, step, step. But that was definitely my dad's voice, and I had no idea how that was possible. I called my mom and asked how much longer she was going to be, and she said that they were on their way home. I took the home phone to my room, turned the TV up loud, and sat against my door so it couldn't be opened, until I heard my mom come home and actually try to open my door. I never told her or my dad that I went down there, because I wasn't supposed to be alone. But that legitimately creeped me out. It didn't end there, though. After that day, I would hear disembodied voices, but it would always be a familiar voice, usually that of my parents and even my uncles. My uncle was really cool, so I remember one time running out of my room looking for him after I heard him. And my mom looked at me like I was crazy when I said that I had heard him, asking where he was. I also seemed to be the only one that could hear it, and felt like it was driving me crazy. I constantly asked my dad if we could check out the crawl space, and after many next weeks or maybe someday, he finally agreed. I let him lead the way, and I pointed out curiously what was in the corner. He saw the same stuff, but didn't open the box. He told me to go get a trash bag, and when I went back to the basement, he was already out of it and holding the stroller. He tossed everything we found into the bag and pretty much chucked the bag and stroller out the side window down there. I was curious what his plans were and if he had opened the box, so I asked what was in it. He said there was nothing special, and when I followed him outside, he just took it all to the trash. Something felt weird to me, though, about the whole experience. Yet again, my dad didn't seem bothered by it, but I felt like someone was watching us and was not happy. This feeling continued for many days, but then something came over me, and I felt like I needed to go back to the crawl space. So, the next time that I was home alone, I went down there again. I went back to that corner and saw that there were still a few of the teeth on the ground. I took them to our backyard and buried them, thinking maybe this was something paranormal. I'd watched a few ghost movies with my mom and did something similar, and part of me thought it was silly while I was doing it, but I still did it. However, I didn't hear the voices at all after that. When I was alone, I didn't hear random footsteps or voices, and I thought, maybe that's what they wanted or needed? Maybe it was a coincidence, but if it was something else, I hope that I was at least able to help them rest. I was house sitting for a family member. The whole day went alright, so before bed, I decided to take a bath. As I relaxed, I looked toward the bathroom door and saw something at the bottom where most doors have that crack near the floor, and I saw something move. It looked like a small child's foot wearing a white sock wiggling its toes. I got so scared, but told myself that it was impossible as there were no children there. After I got out and got dressed, I looked around the house for an explanation, but I couldn't come up with one. When my family member returned, I told her about what I saw, and she said, "That's funny. That's what my kids do when I'm taking a bath." All of her kids were with her at that time. I was the only one there, so there's no way it was them. I've been living on my own for many years now. Around the time of this event, I was in my 30s and had been living in the same apartment complex for about 4 years. It was a one-bedroom, and I decided that I wanted a 2-bed so I could have a spare if I had company, or just to have the extra room. They had someone moving out, and since I was renewing my lease, they asked me if I wanted the new place as a kind of an upgrade for being with them for 5 years. I gladly accepted. It was going to have all new appliances, new carpets, and even an accent wall, so I was pretty excited about it. Thankfully, I didn't have too much stuff to move, so I was able to do it all in a week. The neighbors in the new building were very kind and helpful too. One of them, and their younger son, actually helped me move my mattress and couch in, so that was appreciated. As for the building, they were fourplexes, so each building had a number like 9247, and then the apartment unit with it, such as apartments A through D for the first floor, and the second floor. So then the next building would be 9249 and the apartment numbers. They were all very similar and easy to confuse if you're not paying attention, I suppose. Throughout the week of moving, unpacking, and settling in, I had a few visitors come say hi and introduce themselves. I guess I looked very welcoming or something. They asked me about myself, if I was living alone, if I had any pets, the normal things, I suppose. I also found myself running out to my car or the dumpsters, so I kept the door unlocked during the day and was quick to open it when someone rang. I finished my living room for the most part, and was working away at my kitchen when I had a knock on the door. I looked through the peephole and saw a guy in a baseball cap and t-shirt. Thinking it was another neighbor, or maybe I had dropped something in my shuffling, I mistakenly opened the door with a smile, and they greeted me by shoving me into my apartment, closing the door, and pulling a knife out. He nearly shoved me on my couch and told me not to scream or try anything, or else he would slit my throat. I didn't know what to do other than hold my hands up and wait until he wanted to talk to me. The conversation just went all over the place from there. I remember he said, "Where is she?" I asked who he was talking about, and he said, "Don't mess with me, you know who. Your old man owes me a lot of money, and if he skipped town, then someone has to pay it back." Again, I was terrified and confused because I didn't have a boyfriend or anything like that. I was single, and had been for the past 4 or 5 years. I pleaded with him, trying to explain that I didn't know what this was about, and I tried everything I could to convince him that I was single. I noticed he was looking around at this point while still holding the knife up defensively. And that's when I told him I had just moved in here and that maybe he was mistaken. He told me not to move, and he went to the back of the apartment, pushing the doors open. After what seemed like an eternity of me contemplating if I should actually try to run or just stay there, he came back to the living room and threatened, saying if I told anyone, he would come back, and then quickly left. I got up and locked the door and sat back down on my couch, terrified about what to do next. It's a horrible feeling just moving into a place and then immediately feeling this unsafe. I had lived there so long before, too. It was saddening that this was the first bad experience that I'd really had with this place. I didn't even know if I should call the cops. What could they have done? And if he was outside somewhere watching the place to see if I did, would he have to come back, and would he try something else? I lived alone, so it's not like I had anyone to depend on in such a vulnerable moment. When I finally came to my senses a bit, I decided to go back in my rooms and see if he did anything. He had opened all the doors and shower curtain, like he was looking for someone or something, but I guess he found what he wanted in my bedroom. I had an old jewelry box given to me by my grandmother, and I kept my tips in the bottom part of it, and he had taken all the bills. It was probably about $200 roughly. I was just saving them if I ever needed some extra cash, but at least I got to keep my life. Unfortunately, it seemed like this was a normal scene for this apartment, as when one of my neighbors saw this man come to my door, he called the cops, which they then came knocking on my door. I know it may have been stupid, but I was still afraid, so I just told them that they came looking for someone else, and I told them they had the wrong place. I didn't even have to identify or give a description, as he mentioned the guy had been in the area before and was told to leave the property by management. I told them I would let them know if I saw the guy again, and they left. The rest of that week definitely changed for me. I felt super uncomfortable being alone for a while, so I invited people over to just hang out with me and use unpacking as an excuse. I did finally tell one of my girlfriends that had come over about what happened, and she convinced me that I was probably fine, and that it probably wouldn't be worth the effort of them coming back. In a nice way, of course. And I understood what she was saying. It was reasonable, and definitely helped me to relax a bit. I also ended up running into the same neighbor that called the police at the rental office. I guess he's the neighborhood watchdog type, and he knows the ins and outs of everything. However, he did ask me about the guy and told me a bit about the last tenant that lived in my apartment. He said he thought that they were doing some shady stuff in there, as they always had people coming and going, not staying longer than 15 to 20 minutes. He said he saw the guy that showed up at my door, and he knew that he was also over there frequently. They were constantly fighting and yelling too, so when he saw him enter the complex again, he was worried about me. The last tenant also seemed to move out in a rush, leaving a lot of their stuff. That was part of why there were new appliances and carpet. There was no way that carpet would come out looking clean, according to him. So, whatever they did or whoever they were, they left quite the impression. I had no idea what was going on in this little complex, but mine always seemed quiet, and everyone pretty much kept to themselves. So this was intriguing to learn. Unfortunately, I still had a few more unwanted visitors show up at my door, but it was always locked and I checked who was there before I answered. I ended up taping a note on my door saying the previous residents moved so they would quit asking. So all I have to say is, when you move into a new place, make sure you update everyone, including all your so-called friends. At least for the new tenants' sake. After having a horrible experience with a roommate, I got my first apartment by myself. It wasn't the best, as they were old buildings, so there were several maintenance calls to have things fixed. But the front office people and the techs were also friendly, and they were really fast at getting things done, so I couldn't complain. The buildings were small and had 8 units in each, and my neighbors all seemed pretty chill. There were a couple of old people that I think had lived there forever, and a young couple that I usually only saw in the halls at night. I think they worked the overnight shifts or something, but they definitely were not the social types, which was fine. It just meant that there were even less problems to worry about, as everyone typically minded their own business. While I did live alone, I started dating a guy that I had met through a mutual friend. Sometimes he came over and stayed at my place on the weekends, or if he wasn't working. He was still living at home with his parents, who were also really cool people, but his drive to work was about an hour, and my place was almost the halfway mark. So, sometimes, he would just stop and sleep at my place if he'd had a long day, and didn't want to make the drive all the way home. He was an EMT, and would often work late or overnight shifts, so if he wasn't catching naps at the hospital while on call, it was just easier for him to stay with me. When he did, he would text me that he would be stopping by, and since it would be later, I was usually already asleep as I worked at 7 in the morning. He would come in, kiss me on the head, and typically take a shower before finally passing out. He didn't have a key to my apartment, partially because I wasn't supposed to make copies myself, so I usually just kept the door unlocked. Again, everyone here seemed trustworthy, and there hadn't been reports of break-ins or suspicious people, so I didn't really have a problem with it. It was one of those nights where he was going to be working late, so on his lunch, he told me he was going to stay at my place, and I agreed. I made a large dinner so he could eat something when he got home, too. And around 10 p.m., I finally headed off to bed, texting him goodnight. After some time, I woke up to hearing some noise outside of my room. I figured it was him getting there, so I just tried to go back to sleep, expecting him to be in soon. I even faced away from the door as the bathroom was across from my room. That way, when he opened the door, the light wouldn't blind me. I heard my door creak open a bit, and as I opened my eyes to see the sliver of light on the wall as well as his shadow standing in the hallway. However, instead of coming into my room, he just walked away. I thought that was weird, as he never didn't do what I had mentioned, and it was kind of something I looked forward to. I continued to lay there for a bit, thinking maybe he was going to go eat first, but after I closed my eyes again, I heard the shower running. Now, being an EMT, I know that he can go to some pretty messed up scenes or even lose a patient, so I thought maybe that's what happened, so maybe his mind wasn't in the right place. I decided I would go in there and make sure that he was okay. I got up and I entered the bathroom, and the clothes on the floor, they weren't the scrubs that he was usually in. They were regular clothes, but they were really dirty jeans. He didn't like wearing jeans, so I found it odd. I asked him if he was okay, and he didn't respond. So I started saying something else as I opened the shower curtain when, to my horror, the man in the shower was not my boyfriend. I don't know who was more scared as he started shouting something, but I was also screaming and ran back to my bedroom, locking the door behind me, and I called 911. I could hear some sounds outside my room, like the guy was running around, and I was terrified if he would try to get into my room, but I never heard the doorknob shake or the door even budge. When the police finally showed up, I came out and explained what had happened. The guy was long gone. We walked through to see if he took anything, and I noticed the shower was pretty dirty. It looked like there was mud or dirt or something all over the bottom of the tub. His clothes were gone too, but there were wet prints in the carpet that we could follow. They came out of the bathroom, into the kitchen. There were no puddles and no carpet, thankfully. He had actually taken one of the pre-made salads in the fridge, and then the prints led back out the door. I felt bad as it was late, but they knocked on my neighbors' doors to ask if they saw anything, and I noticed the younger couple was already standing outside talking to the cops. I learned that they had heard the screaming, and when they opened their door to look around, they saw a guy, completely naked, holding a bag and some clothes running out the front door, and they didn't know what had happened. They followed him out the door, and they saw where he went, and they gave his description of the man, which also matched mine. They went around the area, and before they came back, my boyfriend had showed up, and was obviously curious as to why I was awake. I explained everything to him. The cops came back to tell me that they didn't find the guy, but if they did, they would come back to ask me to identify him, and then they left. Unfortunately, they never did call or come back, so I have to guess that he was never caught. However, a few weeks later, I started hearing stories about break-ins in the same city as me, but the person either didn't take anything, or it was just food, and they always seemed to take a shower. I don't remember ever hearing about this happening before my incident, but by then I had seen it a few times. The news interviewed a few people, and someone mentioned that it may be someone who was homeless, just trying to help themselves, I suppose. I don't know if that's what happened in my case, but I could believe it by the shape of the clothes that the man was in. It was still a terrifying situation to be in, but it was weird to me that he definitely looked in my room and saw me. Why not leave at that point? I am glad nothing worse happened, but I went ahead and broke the rules to make a key for my boyfriend, and I never left my door unlocked after that. So that is today's themed video, a video full of Home Alone stories, creepy Home Alone stories. Every single one of these stories, yeah, kind of spooky, kind of creepy. How are we already in August? How is it already August 6th? I need to redo my intro Patreon video. Holy crap, I am behind. Anyways, I hope y'all enjoyed this collection of stories, I've never really had a creepy Home Alone situation. Even renting, the places I've lived, they've been pretty good about not coming in, doing stuff. I've never had someone break in. You know what? I have had one. No, I wasn't home alone, though. It was a creepy situation, though. It was 11 o'clock, and it was way, way back, and I was letting Tyler outside because he was still an outdoor cat at the time. And I opened the door, and there was some guy standing out front of our place, just staring at our garage. And I asked him what he was doing and if I could help him, and he's like, I have the wrong house. I'm looking for my friend. I'm like, you're looking for your friend? Then you have the wrong house. And he walked away. And I'm pretty sure he lived like 2 houses down from me, so I don't know what he was doing. Don't know what he was thinking. He didn't really look like he was casing it, like he was going to break in. He just kind of looked like he was staring at the roof. Yeah, it was creepy. We weren't home alone, it was me and Patience, so I wasn't technically alone, but still a creepy situation to be in, so there's my story. Enjoy. I hope you all are having a beautiful day. I hope you're having a great weekend, and I hope I see you in the next video, my friends. If you like this video, do hit that like button. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing. I know I'm going fast. That's because I talked for like a minute and a half on stupid crap. Anyways. I've already forgotten what I'm saying. Yeah, subscribe, like, comment your thoughts. If you have any stories, send them my way. Super thanks joining Patreon Early Access for the most part. And just, yeah. I hope you all have a great day. And I hope, of course, my friends, I do see you on the next video. Remember, until then, you are loved. You are valid. You are important. There's no one else out there like you, and you are the best you that you can be. Never let anyone tell you otherwise. And my friends, until I see you next time, sleep well.